Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. Today on the show, our nation's foremost expert on the pro-life issue and on all things abortion, Lila Rose, joins me. We'll get right into the state of the movement post-Dobbs and since the One Big Beautiful Bill Act just defunded Planned Parenthood for the year and how Americans are coming around to seeing abortion more clearly now than ever. Lila is small but mighty, young but wildly successful and accomplished, determined as all get out, and passionate to see the practice of abortion ended in the United States. She was called the messenger-in-chief of the pro-life movement by Vice News, the face of the millennial anti-abortion movement by The Atlantic, and the fiercest opponent of abortion by the BBC. She's a writer, speaker, and activist who founded and serves as president of Live Action, a national human rights organization with the largest online impact among pro-life and pro-abortion groups, reaching over 46 million per month and over 2 billion lifetime video views. Lila has devoted her life to ending abortion and making America a more welcoming place to raise a family. She has authored Fighting for Life, Becoming a Force for Change in a Wounded World, and hosts The Lila Rose Show, a podcast that tackles relationships, faith, culture, and politics. Lila, I'm so glad to have you on Politically Basic. Now, just after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act has defunded Planned Parenthood, even for just a year, and 3 years post-Dobbs, we have a lot to get to, so let's jump right in.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm so excited to be on with you. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, give us an update. Since Planned Parenthood has now just been defunded, not permanently, but at least for the year, and where does the pro-life movement stand today?
Yes. So the defund of Planned Parenthood was over 20 years in the making. They have been receiving billions of dollars from the federal government over the last few decades. They're the biggest abortion chain. They kill 1,000 babies every single day in America. So the pro-life movement has been working. Why are we funding this organization, this corrupt death organization? And so the good news is that after many years of investigating, exposing, rallying people to call for defund, finally the government, our Congress, passed defund for 1 year. This is a big victory. It is the biggest pro-life political victory since the overturn of Roe v. Wade. But the pro-life movement has to double down now because our work is twofold. We have to change culture, change hearts and minds, and then we have to change politics and change law. And these things, of course, impact one another. And so the focus of Live Action and many other organizations that we collaborate with, especially smaller groups at the grassroots level, is to educate people, change hearts and minds, especially reaching young people through digital media, through the school system, through other organizations, churches that are on the ground, and then build political power in order to achieve the legal protection for preborn children that they deserve. Defund Planned Parenthood is a step in the right direction, but it is not the end game. We need to completely shut down the abortion industry, and we need complete legal protection for preborn babies.
Absolutely. And amen to all that. You know, Planned Parenthood is such a beast. It's really interesting to look at their own documentation, to look at their 990, to look at their files, really, and see, even though they have been defunded federally, they still bring in just that same amount of money almost from private donations. So how do you continue the fight when we're talking about finances and the money side of such a big industry? How do you fight to further financially hinder the abortion industry?
Well, in the federal funding front, there's still work to do. It's 1 year defund. We need to re-up this, not just re-up it next year. We want to do it permanently, politically. So to do that, Kyle, and I know you know this being in politics is this very unwieldy project where you're dealing with these constant push and pulls from both sides and all of these other considerations that the politicians have, and they're trying to always do what's expedient. And so the most important thing the pro-life movement can do is build a grassroots movement that is unstoppable, that has influence in elections, that has influence obviously on legislation. And the way you do that is by building out infrastructure. You know, we have digital media, we have 8 million followers at Live Action combined. You know, that's all this energy, people really excited about life. How do we then turn that into grassroots activation so people show up and they say, we want Planned Parenthood defunded, we want abortion to be made illegal? We did this at Live Action with this latest defund. We had 200 rallies the weekend before defund took place, right before the 4th of July, over across the country at Planned Parenthood facilities. So people, pro-lifers, turning out to rally to call for the defund. we need to do more of that. So really our focus at Live Action is connect that cultural grassroots piece, that education piece, to political activation.
Yeah, I love that. And you guys talk a lot about social reform of the life issue, but also about how we view abortion and the issues surrounding it. I'm hearing you say grassroots movements and bringing policy down to kind of a personal level for people. Is that how you accomplish that? What is the strategy around how you achieve total and complete social reform on such a complex issue?
So one thing that Live Action is really, I think, unique in and has been successful in is a approach to social reform that really uh, prioritizes an emotional and, yes, intellectual response, but really making this emotional for people. Because abortion's killing a baby. Abortion is this horrific act of violence. It's devastating to women. It's devastating to our country. How do we make that real for people? Because the media is not talking about it. No one's talking about it. No one wants to talk about it because it's so touchy, so sensitive, and so politicized. So what Live Action does is we show the victim, that is this baby, and we tell the story of that baby. So through our media content, we're reaching about 50 million eyeballs a month with our content. We're telling the story of women who've had abortions, of babies that were almost aborted, but then their mother chose life, and this beautiful child is now with us, of people with disabilities who are being aborted at higher rates than anyone else because they're not seen as perfect, of rape survivors who choose life for their baby. I mean, there's so many stories, so many human stories around the issue of abortion. And by telling those stories, using visual media, using social media, you can change hearts and minds on this issue. It's not just a political issue anymore, pro-choice, women's rights in this like rhetorical sense. It's now a real issue where there's human lives at stake and you care about those human lives. And so Live Action's secret to social reform is a tool used by past social reformers, whether they're fighting slavery, whether they're fighting in the civil rights movement against Jim Crow, whether they're fighting against child labor, is to tell the story of the victim and to show images. And now we have video, the power of social media, to tell that story. And when you tell the story of what happens to these babies during abortion and its harm to women, that can help completely to give someone a 180 in their perspective on abortion.
I have to commend you on your programming and your resources because you're very strategic in how you've gone about this. I've heard you talk about the strategy behind it, but what a complex thing as the pro-abortion, so the industry and how people see abortion now, and also the pro-lifers, where they stand today. It has morphed even so much in the last few years. So I really have to commend you on how you have approached it because your resources in those videos on the Live Action website are tremendously impactful. I mean, you talk about changing hearts and minds. You guys are really, really doing it. It's been absolutely brilliant to see you put this fight together. And when I talk about where we're at as a society, there seems to be just the fact that we are such an increasingly apathetic society now. So I think the big question for you today, Lila, is how do we get back to finding our humanity within this issue? I know you guys are doing it, but I was thinking the other day, isn't there irony in or privilege in being alive, being a living human being, and at the same time advocating for abortion, especially a more radically liberal application of abortion up to any point for any reason? Is that living privilege?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's like Ronald Reagan who said that everybody who is for abortion has already been born. Like, yeah, because you made it out alive. What you were saying earlier about what you've seen of Live Action content, and I appreciate the support and all the kind words, because that's what that is the whole secret, is humanizing this issue, getting people to feel about it and to like really have a gut reaction, like this is wrong. I mean, it is the most unnatural thing in the world, actually, for a mother to turn against her own child. How have we gotten to the point that there's 1 million abortions a year, 1 million times a year, women are turning against their own children? How do we change that? How do we reconnect that bond of care back to the child? And there's a lot of factors at play there. But some of the tools that we use at Live Action has been films like Baby Olivia. So Live Action has animated the most medically accurate lifelike depiction of human life in the womb. So you can actually see the development of that baby. That's mind-changing for people. or showing through the words of former abortionists exactly what is happening to these babies, and they're discussing what is happening to these babies. These are all tools to help humanize the issue and help open hearts and minds.
So I want to kind of drill down on this one issue with you, and that is how the optics of a fetus particularly determines someone's stance on life. And you guys address this brilliantly in those videos you were just talking about. Do you think, Lila, that we justify abortion sometimes because a fetus doesn't necessarily resemble a baby until later in the development process, and really not until it's born? I mean, mentally and emotionally, a clump of cells is easier to justify destroying than a human life, right?
I think that is the framing that people use when they justify abortion, or they think it's not a big deal. And that's part of our educational challenge and opportunity to show, no, this is a human. The science is clear that human life begins at the moment of fertilization, not at some arbitrary, weeks number during gestation, not at like 10 weeks or 20 weeks, but at the moment of fertilization, you have a unique single cell human embryo that's individual and a whole person that just needs time and nourishment to grow. And you see that growth rapidly. That's why we create content at Live Action, like Baby Olivia. At just 3.5 weeks, you see the baby's heart start to beat. A lot of women don't even know they're pregnant at 3.5 weeks. At just 7 weeks, there's already brain waves that are forming, and that is helping, develop the systems for the baby so that the baby can continue to grow. So I think there is a misunderstanding about human development that's sort of almost a bias against these children, that, oh, they're less than human because they don't look like you or like me. I mean, a newborn doesn't look like you or like me. They're completely different body shape, they're completely different size, and they're still just as human as you or as I am. And so I think that is a core message of the pro-life movement, is we might look different at different stages of development, but we're all still human. And when it comes to changing minds with this, we've done a lot of surveying, Kyle, and with Baby Olivia, which is this medical animation of life in the womb, we've actually surveyed pro-choice women, hundreds of them, and had them watch the video, tell us how it impacted them. And 12% of pro-choice women said that Baby Olivia, just watching human development from the moment of fertilization until birth, moved them to a pro-life position.
Amazing.
So sometimes it's just the importance of having that that view of seeing human life from its beginnings that can change a heart.
Yeah, it's so remarkable to see how human-like, the baby does look so early on. The fingers, the eyes, the movement. I mean, it's really just brilliant to see that miracle of life, yes, develop. But when people see that, I can imagine, how could you ever justify ending that baby's life when you see them, obviously living, but so human-like so early. And I want to talk about some of your other videos on liveaction.org that are seriously effective at that heart and mind changing experience. And those are the abortion procedure videos that pretty simply and more medically just explain the act of abortion. Now, is this the way we help people regain that humanity? Because no one in their right, healthy mind is going to advocate for a baby being cut to pieces or pulled limb from limb inside its mother's womb.
Yes, that's the power of just knowing what abortion is. It doesn't change everyone's mind, but it changes many minds. And so we work with former abortionists. These are retired, they're retired because they had a change of heart, but these are folks that used to commit abortions. Dr. Anthony Levatino is one of them. He committed 1,200 abortions. And he's now a pro-life advocate and doctor. And he shares in our abortion procedure videos, and these are medical animations. They're not gory, but they are explicit. They show you what happens in a medical animation during these procedures. And he talks about how even in the first trimester, you have this, even just at 8-9 weeks, you have this formed baby with arms and legs, fingers and toes, a newly developing little face that is torn apart by a first trimester suction abortion or starved to death by the abortion pill, which is now the most prevalent abortion method in America. When you learn these things, you can't unlearn them. They stick with you. And even if you think, oh, maybe I'm still pro-choice, even though that's terrible, it sticks with you. You think about that. And there's an opportunity then for the pro-life sentiment to begin to grow. And these videos that we have at Live Action have been viewed over 100 million times online. And we get millions more views of them every month because people are interested in learning what's actually happening, or someone shares it, a friend shares it, and then there's an opportunity for them to change their mind.
Yeah, I mean it when I say it's so effective. Even someone like myself I would put myself very firmly on the pro-life side. It has such an impact on me when I see those things. And never in my life did I ever have an opportunity to really dig in to what the act of an abortion was until, of course, I had Politically Basic. And it's so important to educate just our society, but also I appreciate that you're trying to get a lot of resources into churches and schools, because why shouldn't we ask questions about what this is? Why would anyone blindly, support something if they don't know what it actually is? And so those are so important. Right. And I really encourage everybody to go to liveaction.org and just educate yourself. Go to Planned Parenthood's website. See what they say for themselves. It's pretty surprising, and I bet you anything, it's not going to be what you think it is. So Lila, we asked my followers what they wanted to ask you. And one theme that just kept coming through most predominantly with a lot of these questions had to do with when we determine when life begins. It's a big question in this discussion, and why certain groups care about babies at certain points. So one person said, why does the left think we magically become human or a person only once we exit the mother's body? And another person said, when does life begin scientifically? Do you think this is sort of that crux question of this issue, is when does life begin?
Yes. Well, again, if life doesn't begin at fertilization, then I'm going to quit my work, right? I don't really care. If it's not a human life, then abortion, if abortion is not ending a human life, then there's no problem. There's likely no problem with it. Like what would be the issue with it? The reason that we oppose abortion is because it ends a unique and individual human life. And we have this basic case at Live Action and in the pro-life movement. What is the pro-life position? Well, the pro-life position is very simple. The argument for life is very simple. It's a logical syllogism, and there's 3 pieces of it. It's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human. I think most people agree. Even pro-choice people would say, yes, I agree. It's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human. Well, the second premise is that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human. And then the conclusion is, therefore, abortion is always wrong. So how do we know abortion intentionally kills an innocent human? Because we know, scientifically speaking, that developing human life is human. They have human parents. They are no other species, and they are alive. They're growing. They're not dead. If they were dead, you wouldn't have to kill them via an abortion. The purpose of abortion is to kill them. That is the whole job of the abortionist. They're getting paid for a dead baby. That is what they are getting paid for. So when you look at when you boil down the pro-life argument to really the core, don't kill babies. It's always wrong to kill a human. And the science is very clear that human life begins at fertilization, not at some other arbitrary point. Then I think that really is eye-opening for a lot of people. They had never maybe even heard that before. And they say, wow, that's something I have to at least think about, because before I just thought, oh, women's choice and, these positive sounding terms. I didn't actually consider there's another human life at stake here, and they have rights too.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's part of this issue that's most misunderstood? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but there seems to be a justification that if a baby cannot survive outside of the womb, then it's okay to justify killing that baby. But your point is, when a baby is created inside a mother's body at conception, to harm that baby, to take its life, to remove it, even in an environment in which it wouldn't survive, that's all the same. It doesn't, we don't draw a line there. Do you think that that is one of those concepts that is the most misunderstood? And if not, what would you say is the biggest misconception about this specific issue?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I do think there is this tendency to think in terms of gestational markers for humanity to say, oh, well, the baby is 10 weeks old or 20 weeks old, therefore it's not okay to abort the baby. Why? Why do you pick 10 weeks? Why do you pick 20 weeks? Some people say, well, when the baby's old enough to survive outside the womb, then they should be protected by law from abortion. And it's saying, well, why? Because medical technology is what gives the baby the opportunity to survive at a very young age outside the womb, like a preemie and NICU. But are we then basing our humanity and our human rights based on how good our medical technology is? And that's not a fair standard. That's not rational or just for this baby. They were that same baby seconds earlier before delivery. Why is it that when you're in a different location, you're in your mother's womb, all of a sudden you have no rights? You can be dismembered alive via a DNC abortion versus all of a sudden you're born, you're in NICU in the hospital, someone would go to jail maybe for life if they murdered you. Like, why the same baby has very different rights just because of the location? It's not fair to that child. It's not just. So there are a lot of arguments, rationalizations for abortion, but they all hinge on a very inconvenient, ignoring a very inconvenient fact, which is that it's a life. It's a human life. He or she is a human life. And you can make all kinds of rationalizations for killing an innocent human life, but none of them stand up to the standard of justice, which says that if you are a human being, especially if you are innocent, you have a right to live. And your first human right is life. Without that right, no other rights are possible. We have to secure and protect that right.
Yeah, all roads lead back to that, really, to that understanding and that concept. Because people can make the case, well, when someone falls into a coma or they have a ventilator, they have machinery breathing for them or keeping their heart going, you can make all kinds of ethical cases about that. But I believe you are so spot on. It just comes down to determining when is life life. It's at conception, and here we go. And God doesn't make mistakes, right? I think that's another really interesting factor here is people who are very pro-abortion for any reason at any time, you're really playing God in that sense too. And I know that's a whole other discussion. But along the lines of how good is our technology, how good is our medicine, we've got to talk about birth control. Do you think that how we stand culturally right now, that people have now replaced maybe more traditional birth control methods, the pill, IUDs, condoms, good old-fashioned abstinence, Lila, just with the ability to have an abortion?
Well, I think that abortion has always been a necessary backup birth control method for people that are not ready to be parents, but engaging in sexual activity. And I think that's something that the pro-life movement sometimes historically has not talked about enough, that we don't have the abortion crisis out of nowhere. It comes from the sexual revolution in this country, where we took sex outside of marriage and made that the norm. And then we put contraception on top of sex, and we said adults, provided they're consenting, have the right to child-free sex. And so if you get pregnant when you are having sex, after having sex, and you don't want that baby, then your birth control failed you if you were on it, and you have the right now to get an abortion. And that entire logic is the logic of the sexual revolution that puts adults' sexual desires and interests before the lives of children and before the rights of children to a married mother and father who love each other, who keep sex within marriage. And so I think the way to shift all of this culturally, along with ending abortion, protecting these babies, you have to influence the behaviors of adults. Because if adults instead saw sex as sacred, sex belongs in marriage, sex has the ability to bring life into the world, and that's beautiful. And if I'm going to be sexually active, it's going to be with somebody who I would be happy if they were the father or mother of my children. And so if the baby does result from sex, we will embrace this life instead of kill it or kill him or her. And that shift is possible, Kyle. It does seem very strange today because we're so used to the sexual revolution and the nonsense of, oh, you can have sex at any time with anyone, premarital sex is no big deal, sexual promiscuity, whatever, you do you. Just use birth control, you'll be fine. That is a lie. the reality is 50% of women who get pregnant and have abortions are on birth control the month that they got pregnant.
Wow.
Birth control does not stop abortions. Birth control creates a system that incentivizes people to be part of activity, sexual activity that is not in the framework of a loving, committed marriage. And then they end up using abortion as their backup birth control.
Right. And that just leads me into my next question for you so beautifully. Just as the sexual revolution, as you say, or free, open sex with multiple partners or outside of marriage does have a very powerful emotional effect, particularly on women. Abortion, the act of removing a baby, of killing a baby inside the womb, has powerful physical, mental, emotional, spiritual effects on a woman's body, and we're not talking about it. I mean, you guys are talking about it, but why are we as a country thinking that we're advocating for women to be empowered and have these choices and have reproductive rights protected, which actually doesn't make any sense because no one's trying to take anyone's reproductive rights away. But we're ignoring her after the abortion and what she goes through.
Right. Well, I think we bury our heads in the sand, Kyle, because it's inconvenient to say that abortion isn't good for women, because we've been told for decades that it is good for women, and there's entire political organizations and abortion corporations like Planned Parenthood built around the lie that abortion is good for women. But the reality is abortion kills babies, and it's devastating for women. In California, my very pro-abortion state, there was a survey done on women who were low income, who were on Medicaid, who had abortions. And the cohort of women who had abortions versus the women who didn't have abortions, low income women, young women, same cohort. The only difference was one group had abortions and one group didn't. Among the women that did not have abortions, they were the women that had abortions were 150% more likely to attempt suicide. The mental health toll of women who have abortions is not talked about, but it's real. And it leads to suicidal ideation, addictive behaviors, relationship issues, and tremendous regret. But that regret is not talked about because it's not, it's taboo. You're not allowed to say you regret your abortion today. You are allowed only to say, I shout my abortion, I love my abortion. That is not the case for most women. I'm not saying every woman regrets her abortion. Some women have stuffed it down so deep they think it's great. But for many women, they regret it. But in our society today, we're told, you do you. You don't need that baby. That's a burden. You got to do you, do your education, do your career, do your thing, and exercise your right to choose. But it leads to devastation for many women.
You're so right. I just interviewed a woman who felt that her work environment, her professional career would absolutely not allow her to be pregnant. She had 2 abortions and she's powerfully regretful. She grieves the loss of her children. And it's just devastating. I so wish for our country and our culture that we'll do better. But Lila, where does this fight go? As these pro-abortion groups become increasingly boundless, let's call it, right? So abortion for all, abortion at any stage. The actress Cynthia Nixon just was wearing the shirt that said, make abortion great again. We have this culture of sex stunts and free sex all the time, anytime, whatever you want, everything's okay. You guys are getting more strategic. The opposition, let's call it, is getting more liberal in a radical way. Where do you see the fight going in the coming years?
Well, the pro-abortion side is extremely active, galvanized. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars, Kyle, on marketing campaigns and development in order to get people to think abortion's okay. So the pro-life side has to combat the lies and the misinformation of the pro-abortion side. That's what Live Action spends most of its time focused on, is digital campaigns to educate people on the humanity of the baby, on the evil of abortion, telling all of these stories, presenting the case for life. So we need to double down on that. And then in addition, Live Action's working on building out what we're calling the flywheel, We have all this media. We're reaching 50 million people a month. Wonderful. Now, how do we turn this into grassroots development and activation? And when you build that out, so you have media inspiring people to get involved then in grassroots, and then they're activated for particular political or social battles, and then that feeds more media coverage and more media eyeballs, and it keeps going. That's how you build an unstoppable movement. We just defunded Planned Parenthood. It was in no small part because of all the media attention exposing Planned Parenthood, the grassroots that we were helping to galvanize with other organizations, and then that push towards activation and getting the defund to happen. We need to run that again and again and again until we see complete abolition of abortion, as well as the pro-family policies that families deserve, like giving cash credits to families that have children, things like that. The number one thing the government should be doing is helping families foster life, not destroy it. So all of this is possible, but we got to invest in the movement. And so Live Action's focused on growing the movement and building an institution and an infrastructure that can be that flywheel of political and social activation.
Yeah. Lila, as we wrap up, and this is such a great discussion, and again, I just want to thank you for everything that you're sharing on the show today. You say, and I believe that you are firmly committed to seeing abortion abolished in our lifetimes. People who live fearfully of that, for whatever reason, have expressed concern that maybe a President Trump or a future president would make abortion illegal federally. When we talk about the end to abortion, what does that look like to you? And do you think that, seeing something come down from the federal government or from an administration is realistic as a component to seeing abortion abolished?
Yes, I think it is realistic, Kyle. It's a great question. But yes, we need federal action. I mean, the federal government has the job to ultimately follow our Constitution. Our Constitution has a 14th Amendment, which declares equal protection under the law for all people. This includes babies, it includes children, and no right has the state to deprive life of any person without due process. Licensing abortionists to kill babies for profit in a state like California violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So there's absolutely a role for state governments, local governments, and the federal government to get involved in banning abortion. Is this going to happen next year? Unlikely, right? We have an administration who is not 100% aligned on this issue, which is, a challenge, but they've done some good things, which we're very grateful for, but there's a lot of work left to be done. So what do? We grow a political and social movement that is unstoppable. This year, defund Planned Parenthood. We also want to pull the abortion drug from the market. It should not be sent via mail, right? That's 50% of abortions, babies being killed in dorm rooms and bathrooms. It's a dangerous drug. It lands 1 out of every 22 women in the emergency room. The abortion pill, we got to ban that drug. So accomplish that as a next step. Now let's keep moving. And so I believe that if we keep up the pace and if we grow significantly as a movement, we can abolish abortion, certainly in my lifetime and within the next decade or so. But it's going to take iterative wins. It's going to take an intense investment in social outreach and social media and all of the great work that we get to be a part of. And then it's going to take us pushing politically for the end game, which is abortion abolition. And I do think we can accomplish it. People said we would not be able to overturn Roe v. Wade. It's impossible. People told me that it would be impossible to defund Planned Parenthood. Well, our work is, with God's grace and prayer, making the impossible possible for the sake of the children that we are fighting for.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Okay, really fast, Lila. I'm going to squeeze one in at the last second. Trump's executive order to protect access to IVF and reduce the costs. There are a lot of ethical questions that have just magically sprung to the forefront of our minds when we weren't really thinking about IVF recently. What's your take on IVF?
Yes. So I think the overarching goal of we want to help families be able to have babies is a beautiful one. Infertility is a real cross for a lot of people. That said, IVF, I do not believe is the way. It's very ethically problematic. And the reason for that is IVF is not about creating the building blocks for human life. IVF creates new human lives. And the way that it is done is in ultimately effectively a test tube, right? This new human life is created. and in the pursuit of getting a live birth, getting a baby, that cherished child that this couple wants so badly, you're talking a 90%, up to 9 out of those 10 embryos that you had to create will die in the process. There are an estimated 1 million children in deep freeze right now, human beings in deep freeze in IVF clinics. There are potentially millions of children who are being destroyed every single year, certainly globally, and at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions in the US. It's hard to even know because there's almost no regulation of the IVF industry. These are human beings too. If we believe that human life is human life and has value, we would oppose IVF because you're creating human life in a test tube. You are freezing human beings. You are destroying human beings that are not seen as good enough. And you are risking the lives of children through a very ultimately unsafe medical procedure that's really challenging for the mom, by the way, and can be even dangerous for the mom. And that can be very lethal for the child. Many children are miscarried via IVF as well. So what is the solution? And we actually worked with the Trump administration. We sent over a memo. We got some doctors on calls with some of the staff there. There is an ethical solution to infertility, but it's not the glossy, expensive IVF. It's restorative reproductive medicine, where you work within the body of the woman to address the underlying health issues that she or her partner may have that are the reason for the infertility. You don't put the Band-Aid on it of birth control. You don't just send out the sperm and egg to a lab. You actually work within the human body. And the success rates for restorative reproductive medicine, when practiced by a physician who is trained in it, are as good as the success rates for IVF achieving a live birth.
Yeah.
Most people have no idea about this. They're being told by their doctors, oh, you're struggling to get pregnant, go get IVF.
Yeah.
What people are told, they don't know better. So if we invest in, instead of IVF, restorative reproductive medicine, train more doctors to do this, to make this more available to patients, as well as get more of the money model outside of the big fertility industry, which is making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars off of IVF, then we can change this, and it's safer for babies and it's better for families.
Wow. I didn't know a lot of that. Thank you for letting me get that last question in there. I think that is so important that people hear that. And with this MAHA movement and what's happening in our country right now, we are really getting down to kind of the root causes instead of just medicating and coming at it from that pharmaceutical standpoint. Lila, we have not always done the best for our babies and our mamas and our families in this country, but you are a warrior for change in that respect. And I am so grateful to you for everything that you are doing, everyone who works with you at Live Action, just the powerful ways that God is using you for good in this world. So God bless you. Keep up the fantastic work. And I hope you'll come back on the show again soon, and we'll get some more updates from you.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Keep up the wonderful work. And it was so fun to see you the other week.
Always great. Please come back. We love seeing you in person.
You got it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at Politically Basic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time.